Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we now continue with Roundtable 2. This roundtable will focus on a key pillar of Africa-Gulf cooperation. We will be discussing how we strengthen the trade corridors, port hubs, and logistics systems that connect our region. Across Africa, major gateways are driving this connectivity. Tanger Med is Africa's largest port and now ranks among the top 20 globally. The Suez Canal carries 12 to 15% of the global maritime trade, making Egypt's ports, including Port Said, critical links between the Gulf and Africa. And in the east, Djibouti anchors the routes connecting the Gulf, the Red Sea, and inland markets. But despite this momentum, connectivity is still uneven. Different border procedures, different digital systems, and real constraints are still there. And so today our goal is to understand this reality. Our goal is to explore what it will take to build a modern and integrated Gulf Africa corridor that will work end to end. And so to unpack this, it is my great pleasure to welcome on stage an incredible lineup of speakers shaping connectivity across our regions. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Gira Warsama, Chief Executive Officer, Djibouti Ports Community Systems. Let's please give him a round of applause as he's making his way to the stage. We're also welcoming Mr. Akibouli, Founder and Chief Executive Officer of IBS Group. Let's give him a round of applause. Welcome, sir. Very nice to meet you. It's our pleasure to have Mr. Abdullahi Bashir, Chief Executive Officer, AANR Investment Limited. Such a pleasure having him with us as well. And we will be joined by Mr. Reda Boulos, Chairman, Egyptian African Arab Company for Development. Pleasure to have you, sir. Ahla wa sahla. And finally, we are also very pleased to have with us Mr. Carlos Conde, Head Middle East and Africa Division of OECD. Giving him a round of applause as he's making his way to the stage. Welcome to you both. Hi, very good. Hi, nice to meet you. So, gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you with us. We will have 2 rounds of questions, and if time allows, we will open up the questions to the audience. So let's dive in. I would like to start with you, Mr. Warsama. You are the CEO of Djibouti Ports Community Systems and the architect of Djibouti's port digitalization. So at the crossroads of the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, Djibouti, of course, plays a strategic role in anchoring the trade routes between the Gulf and the east of Africa. How would you assess the current connectivity between Gulf ports and African hinterlands today, and where do you see the main bottlenecks?
Okay, thank you for the question. As you have rightly stated, Djibouti is an important logistic hub in the region. Our ports handle more than 90% of Ethiopia's import and exports. And beyond Ethiopia, we handle the majority of humanitarian cargo going all the way to South Sudan. Djibouti is also a signatory of the Dessu Corridor, a new corridor in development linking Djibouti, Ethiopia, South Sudan, and Uganda. This new corridor has been signed in late 2023, and the 4 countries have basically started working on the authority, a management authority that will manage all this, the integration of this corridor. At Djibouti Ports and Free Zone Authority, we have invested a lot on digital technologies. Obviously, when we have the majority of the transactions going through the ports, going to neighboring countries, it's very important to have transparency. And for the past 5 years, we have mostly succeeded in providing transparencies in one of the most obscure places in the world in terms of trade information. And as we were digitalizing all these processes through Djibouti Port Community System, this is our single window platform in Djibouti, handling maritime single window, import and export, digitalization of imports and export processes. And as we were digitalizing and integrating all these different processes from ports, customs, stakeholders, we have gathered a lot of information, a lot of data relating to trade. Providing insight, we have made these information accessible to all the investors wishing to invest in the region through through our Djibouti free zones or beyond, and the free zones in Ethiopia. So we can see a lot of information through that business intelligence platform. We can see the state of Gulf countries' imports or basically exports through to our region, which amounts to 25% of mostly petroleum products. We can see also a lot of increase in other products from Saudi Arabia. They are very basically they are very working collaboratively with our Djibouti Ports and Free Zone Authority to establish more and more Saudi businesses in Djibouti free zones. But most of the goods coming from Gulf countries, mostly from Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, they are petroleum-based products and a little bit of steel. We can see a lot of hesitance. There's some hesitance in investing a lot in Africa from the Gulf countries. Exporting to our region is not a problem, but when it comes to establishing a presence in the region, it's quite difficult to attract some of the investors. Bear in mind that with the logistics inefficiencies in our region, especially in landlocked countries like Ethiopia and beyond Ethiopia, South Sudan, it would really make sense for investors to come and establish some type of presence in our region, whether in Djibouti or Ethiopia, to be closer to the target markets. Some of these investments could be distribution centers or some type of light transformation where they would finalize the heavy transformation in their Gulf countries and do some light transformation in the region. So this is something that we are very much willing to see and willing to also provide all the different facilitations to attract this type of investments.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this picture on the Djibouti-Ethiopia and corridor and how digitalization is already shaping the first mile. I'll come back to you later to see how we could deepen and see how to make these partnerships flourish. Let's now move into the inland perspective. And Agibou, let me come to you. We are looking at massive export volumes coming out from West Africa, soon reaching 300 million tons between bauxite and iron ore. Is the current logistics infrastructure capable of absorbing this volume? Or do we need a fundamental shift in how we will need to design our port systems?
Thank you very much. Thanks for the question. A pleasure to be here. Thanks to Choiseul and the government of Qatar for the invitation. It's a great question. Look, for the last 15 years, my country, Guinea, where I'm from, has built about 20 small ports, right, to basically be able to export one of our main commodity, which is bauxite, which is used to make aluminum, which is necessary for modern life, from your car to your spoon at home. But this was done with minimum capital, so it was done in a basically, the easiest possible way, which is small transshipment systems, right? And what this has created is a lot of dispersed value, right? So as you know, last year Guinea did 150 million tons of bauxite, and what we call 200,000 ton boats cannot come to the river port. So you need to have a barge to take it up to the sea and do a transshipment. So today you have a clear opportunity to arbitrage and extract value by building one or two deep sea ports that can absorb that whole process. And the issue is only going to get bigger because we just launched the biggest iron ore export facility in Africa, which is the Simandou project, which is going to be at peak 120 million tons. That's also going to start by transshipment. So today, there's a clear opportunity for capital from the Gulf to work with entrepreneurs and logisticians and operators from Africa, to capture that opportunity. This is not build it and they will come. This is they are already here, build it, right? So for us, when we look at risk, this is some of the lowest risk investment and deployment of capital you can think of, because the operators are already spending money to do the transshipment activity. So for us, this is one example of how sometimes the perception of risk in our markets, it's really off the mark, right? Because we have to look at what actual activity is happening, how value is actually being created, okay, and how can capital be deployed basically to optimize this activity. In the last 4 years, Guinea has attracted more than $25 billion, okay, in direct investment. And the interesting part is that it's really, I call it weird money, because for the last 5 years, the geopolitical activity in the world does not basically explain what happened in Guinea, because it's a project between Chinese investors and Western investors working together on one project in a country that for the first time is receiving this kind of investments. So we think there's huge opportunities for the Gulf, the capital in the Gulf and the expertise in the Gulf to have a better approach and understanding and analysis of risk in the markets that we are, because the return on investment that you can get from a place like Guinea today, you can get nowhere else.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Agibou. Huge opportunities indeed, but also realities. And of course, behind the operational realities, there is also the question of investment. So turning to you now, Abdullah Bashir, from the perspective of an investor operating across Africa, what barriers, what frictions, whether regulatory, administrative, or operational, most affect the performances of trade corridors today?
Thank you very much for your question. First of all, I think Africa is actually one of the most difficult place to work. In terms of barriers, there are barriers, but there are always ways around the barriers. And because one of the speakers here earlier was talking about the central banks consolidating their systems and because we have the French side, there is English side, and everybody has its own different way of operating already. So if we were able to come like GCC to become one, there could have been a collaborative effort on how to, consolidate like the way the Caribbean is today. So I think the most important thing is maybe along the line, our grandchildren can be able to actualize that so that we can have a centralized way of collaborating with dealing with the challenges. There are challenges, but for now, we are finding ways around the challenges. And one of the major challenges is within Africa, even still, if I go from Nigeria to Ethiopia, for example, I need a visa. And that visa sometimes takes a process to get that visa. And to get that visa, I can't be able to get a visa on arrival. It has to, through embassy, through this, through that. So this is one of the major, and in terms of the intra-African, the AFTSA, or African Free Trade. So it's
Zone, yeah.
still ongoing, which will support movement of goods and be within those areas that can support and reduce some of the barriers that we have, because we have, like, when we produce our goods, sometimes we cannot go to Cameroon. They are our neighbors because the language barrier, the gender, so there are a lot of different factors that affect trade between those things. But I think the AFTSA is really helping, and there's a lot of effort to make sure that supports and reduce those barriers. But I still have my own visa all the time. Visa is one of the major, is an example. So, but along the line, we will become like GCC as well. But Africa is still Africa, is great, huge opportunity,
Yeah.
huge risk as well, and huge return on investment as well. So Africa is still the place to be.
It
as
is
of today.
indeed the next place
Yeah,
to be. Thank you
thank you
so
very
much
much.
for sharing your experience. So yes, people flow, capital flow, fragmented because of 54 countries, 54 ways of doing business, but still ways to work around those barriers. This is what you're saying, because huge opportunity there. Thank you very much for your perspective. Reda, I'd like to come to you now. Given your work across several African markets, where do you see the biggest disconnects between African and Gulf logistics strategies today, and what is slowing down full alignment?
So let me first start by saying that Africa, it's not the future, it's the present. And during the present, we've found a lot of problems and disconnects. To be very analytical, let's say it's a couple of disconnects: fragmentation versus integration, short-term versus long-term, and lack of alignment. So if you are taking those points, we will understand what is the disconnect between, I would say, international investment, GCC interest, which is normal, and it's the normal continuity for GCC, it's Africa. And normal roots of GCC commerce, it's as well Africa. So if you have a look for GCC ports operators, they are always creating their concepts with a full integrated way, including logistical, industrial, captivating added value, and so on. While in Africa, ports are just isolated maritime islands, like 20 ports, making trust shipments and so on. No integration, no anchoring. Ports are not anchored to corridors usually. And if I take, for example, just an example to illustrate this, you have the Central African countries. So you have Gabon, Chad, Cameroon, Central African Republic. They have all regional flows, but all those regional flows are not connected with a corridor, making Limbe port or other ports like Mayumba in Gabon that should be constructed by IGAD and other partners are not feasible and scalable and bankable because there is no integration. So this is the fragmentation towards integration problem. And the other one that is short-term towards long-term. Any actor and operator in ports or corridors and logistics will be always looking for 30 to 40 years cycle. While in Africa, we are working in a very short cycle, very political driven cycles. So unless we understand that continuity is the key. We will never be attractive for GCC investors and putting policy that is going over and beyond short-term and political gains and so on. So this is as well the disconnect that we have to overcome. The third one, and this is the most important, is alignment. Corridors are not stopping at the border. Regional, I would say, exchange are not stopping at borders. We have a lot of inlands and locklands richness that, and countries that they need to as well to export. So alignment between the African countries are a key for, and from one side it's disconnect, from the other side it's a key for success. Nevertheless, some countries has succeeded. For GCC, I would say, in triangulation, IGAD, we are working a lot in triangulation. We have succeeded already in Egypt to captivate, I would say, like Ain Sokhna and other 6 areas in the corridors and ports to captivate GCC investments with as well added values, but as well Dakar, as well Pointe Noire and in Angola. So you have disconnects, but we still have success stories.
We still have success stories, indeed. Thank you very much for that. Carlos, turning to you now. We tend to think of connectivity as infrastructure, when in reality it's much more, right? It's economic, digital, social, and this is exactly why OECD's work is important. From your perspective, which structural reforms across these different dimensions are the most urgent for us today to improve the importance of the Gulf Africa corridor?
Thank you very much, Manal, and thank you to the organizers and Choiseul for inviting us to this very important dialogue that for sure will be very successful and become a periodical gathering for all of us. Yes, indeed, I think it's very important what you pointed out. When we are talking about infrastructure, it's not about individual projects. Of course, they are important. They have to be well managed, but it's important to look into the full picture, to make this a tool for sustainable development and for economic growth in an effective manner. And there are very good examples in Africa. Mehdi was mentioning this morning Tanger Med, for example, an example of development in Morocco. We have been working very closely with the Suez Special Economic Zone during the last years. I think these are good examples that put together a very ambitious infrastructure development in the form of ports and other transport facilities, but integrating this into a national strategy of economic diversification, attraction of capital, diversification of the economy, and connecting this infrastructure with the overall trade and investment policy of the country. Not only that, but also looking into the domestic conditions for creating opportunities for jobs and SME development, for example. So I think it's sometimes important giving maybe a step back to the individual projects of infrastructure and looking into overall policy frameworks, into overall regulations that would really create the enabling environment for these projects to be successful. So when it comes to Africa, there is a very important momentum of policy reform. There is a very important momentum of economic integration, and is a priority, really looking into that. You were mentioning what are the structural policies that matter and how better putting them in place. Well, it has already been mentioned this morning, the implementation of the African Free Trade Agreement, the Continental Free Trade Agreement, the AFCFTA, is a fundamental opportunity for Africa. A lot has to be done to put this in practice, and there is an engineering, there is a technicality of economic integration in which the OECD has been working for decades. The Free Trade Agreement incorporates important regulatory and policy reforms in different areas that have to be implemented. We have the protocols on investment, on trade in services, on trade in goods, on digital trade, on competition. It's very important that all this regulatory harmonization and convergence is implemented at the national level, because this will create the conditions for an integrated economy in which the infrastructure will play the role of being the enabler of more economic growth and more prosperity. This is a domestic agenda. African countries have to concentrate on that, but this is a continental agenda. And I would say that Africa is institutionally well equipped. The AFCFTA Secretariat in Accra is doing wonderful work to promote the implementation of the agreement. Of course, the African Union provides a vision and provides a strategic convergence of the continent in the economic and social goals, but we have also these regional economic communities that are working hard to make this happen. It's fundamental to provide support to all these institutions. Now, when it comes to the Gulf, of course, is a major partner, is a tremendous capacity to provide Africa with capital, but I think the Gulf can play an important role in this process beyond being a provider of capital. It can be a positive actor of this economic transformation, of this economic integration. Let's not forget that Gulf countries, the Arab funds, are among the major donors and providers of aid for cooperation. It's important that this tremendous cooperation that is provided by the Gulf is also working on this policy update and this institutional development and this economic integration. There are different instruments, blended finance. There are many ways in which the Gulf countries, not only as a private investors, but also as institutional providers of aid, can help. But then let's look also very closely into the quality of the investment, because very often in Africa there have been investments that have provided good return to investing countries, but not necessarily contributed to the development of Africa. Now, this is why we have a strong call for applying principles of responsible business conduct for international investors and to look into the quality of investment, how investment is contributing to SDGs, to environmental principles, to creating jobs or gender equality, for example. Just a last short reference to a second element that it's important from our perspective, and this is about data, about information, about transparency. This morning we have heard that sometimes still Africa is suffering from this perspective, this perception of being a risk destination. And we think we have to fight this perception, and the best way of doing this is improving the quality of the data, the information about what is happening in Africa. What are the opportunities? One of the most important initiatives of the OECD, a flagship initiative that we have in this moment together with the African Union, is what we call the AVIP, the African Virtual Investment Platform. This is a major operation with the African Union to improve the quality about investment opportunities, investment policy, investment regulations in Africa. This is a virtual platform that is already online, but we are incorporating data progressively that can be a tool in which investors, governments can look into their positioning in terms of investment opportunities and what are the conditions that facilitate the success of these investments. Coming back, and I stop here, to the area of connectivity, we are working with several countries and groups of countries in what we call the Connectivity Scoreboard, which is a system of a monitoring system incorporating a large number of indicators from trade facilitation to digital connectivity, etc., to measure what is the status of the connectivity between different countries, and this allows you to see where are the gaps, what are the bottlenecks, and how the right policy solutions can help to undertake these difficulties. So, to sum up, strong policy frameworks, improving the business climate, making efforts for better information indicators and statistics.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Carlos Conde, for these strong points, an excellent bridge into our second round of questions. I would like us now to do a very brief second round before we open up to questions from the audience. And now we will shift from diagnosis to the direction, what we need to build next to create a modern, integrated Gulf Africa corridor. Gira, let me start with you again. Looking ahead, how can gateways, ports like Djibouti play a stronger role in shaping an integrated Gulf Africa corridor beyond the port itself and into wider logistics and industrial ecosystem?
Okay, thank you for the question. This is a question we've asked ourselves back in 2015, and it has a lot to do with the fragmented logistics systems that Reda was talking about. And this is the backdrop we are working against when we first started with the Djibouti Port Community System Initiative, which was started by the President of Djibouti, Mr. Ismail Omar Guelleh. The idea was to unify not only the governmental processes, but also the logistical processes and include also the private sector. You can see that you have many different, also single windows. You have maritime single windows, you have trade single windows, you have custom single windows. Even these systems are fragmented. And without the private sector included into the logistic, or including the logistic chain into this integration of system aimed at facilitating trade, will be still missing something. So the idea was very clear: provide a unified approach, a unified system that would be looking at the problem from the perspective of the importers, exporters, whether they are based in a country or even outside the country, for the landlocked countries that we are servicing through our ports. So that was the aim. So we started with the first flow of information coming into the country, which is the ships and everything that they contain, you know, the maritime single window. And as we have digitalized these processes, we have included the private sector, the shipping agents, submitting all the documentation. And this information is being reused again and again throughout the logistic chain to create some, what we call a single source of, a single trustworthy source of data that can be reused again and again throughout the logistic chain. Then we have added the import-export processes by including the customs, submitting the manifest. We have included the forwarders, very important private sector stakeholders for the transit component, because all the importers, exporters, let's say, are based in neighboring country. Forwarders are handling everything for their customers across the border. So they are very key to include this private sector. Why? Because the private sector are also part of the inefficiencies that are happening throughout the logistic chain. To give you an idea, a forwarder can have 10 orders from a neighboring countries to finalize the process, but only has liquidity for like 5. So he will put 5 aside and focus on his priorities, while at the same time complaining about ports and customs. He will provide the wrong information to the final importer in the across the border. And how did we attempt to solve this issue? Since the government cannot intervene in private sector, what you call it, interaction, we have provided transparency through the single platform that we have, Djibouti Port Community System. The importer in Ethiopia can see actually what is happening. The freight forwarder did not provide the necessary, or did not pay the necessary invoices, port fees invoices. They know that they have not started the importing process or the transit processes, so they can get on the phone and push them. And again, we have also included the trackers, very important components. They, especially when they're working across countries, they tend to go into the port and try to find side jobs as well, and they get sidetracked for 3-4 days and then tell the final importer they're having issues with the equipment, or having issues with ports, and having issues with customs. So the private sector, we have seen, are very much also responsible for the delays and inefficiencies in the logistic chain. So we have also included the trackers. An importer in Ethiopia or a transit company can see the time the vessel has come in. They can see the loading and unloading process. They can see the delivery order, shift of responsibilities from the shipping agents to the forwarder, whether the forwarder has paid, provided the necessary payments for fees invoice. Did they book properly? What time was the gate out connected to all the different ports in Djibouti? They can see directly from the from our track and trace
Increases
module.
efficiency,
yes,
right?
Yes. And then and they can see the corridor also, whether the tracker got the corridor ticket or not. So this is very important. And this was the first phase of the platform, digitalizing processes. And based on the information we got, then we were able to, like I've said earlier, build some type of business intelligence. This business intelligence was not only important for the finding trade opportunities, but also for logistic purposes. They saw, or they can see the efficiency of the forward that they're using. How long does it take them to finalize the processes? How long does it take them to make the necessary payments? And beyond that, we have recently finalized artificial intelligence module where we were using the last 7 years' data to assess the time or when will the final importer or the forwarder or even the trackers, when will they come to get the containers? We're able to find that 60% of the transactions of our container ports, we're able to accurately predict within 24 hours of the prediction the pickup time of the container. And the reason why was that there were a lot of serious companies, logistics companies working for factories across the border in Ethiopia that were very diligent in their work and very predictable. So it's not all bad. 60%, I think, it's a decent amount. So this is how we've been using this information. And what is missing after that? Obviously, we need to finalize or address these logistical issues by connecting all the different stakeholders and providing transparency and visibility across the logistic chain. But there is also the trade process. This is very, very important component. We are working separately on another initiative to connect markets. Yes? It's quite simple. We need to get the exporters and importers, get them to know each other. Yes? We can see, and the repository we managed to gather goes beyond Djibouti. Yes? And we are trying to interconnect different markets in Africa. And beyond, obviously, there will be the Gulf, market. So, very simple, get the importers and exporters to know each other, select serious exporting companies with quality products that are diligently providing their products across the region, and a simple RFQ system, request for quotation, will enable them to request the necessary information on pricing and the product itself. And then there will obviously be time to connect the LC, the banking sector, insurance companies, and at the same time link it to this logistic system we've been able to create to get end-to-end chain. And I'm also part of a Foresight initiative, 20 experts gathered by the International Port Community Association to think about the next stage of logistic systems. And what we are seeing is that the logistic system and trade system are merging.
Okay.
Yes. And I think this is the next step in the evolution of these systems. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this comprehensive overview, a strong vision of Gateway ports, not just as physical hubs, but also as digital ecosystems driving efficiency and transparency, as you mentioned. Aguibou, back to you now. Moving to industrialization, how can Gulf capital specifically unlock Africa's potential here? Is there an opportunity to use this capital to position Africa not just as a raw material exporter, but as a strategic manufacturing bridge between Chinese technology and European markets?
Thank you. Absolutely. I think it's a great logistical opportunity first. As you know, the Gulf played a pit stop role for basically all the trading happening from, for example, China to Africa, right? Dubai, for example, became basically the big warehouse really for Africa, where a lot of the consolidation and dispatching were happening from. I think what's going to happen more and more, especially with all of the trade wars issues, is that the world is in need of a neutral space, right? And Africa today is what I think is that neutral space. There's a clear need here to use the geographical proximity of, for example, the west coast of Africa, where, for example, a straight flight from Conakry to Brazil, it's about 4 hours. So it's 1 hour more for me to get to Brazil than to get to Morocco. Okay, so geographically, I think there's an opportunity there. I think both the Gulf and the European capital markets have a real importance to look at industrializing Africa quickly. Right now, that space and that play is being done by China. Okay, so for me, it's going to be really important for basically capital from the Gulf, entrepreneurs from Africa to work together and basically hit some low-hanging fruits. I give you one example. You mentioned earlier, just in Guinea, we have about 150 million tons of bauxite being shipped every year to China. These come back, these vessels, that's an empty leg return, right? So what can be put in there? For me, I've been in Qatar for the last few days. I've seen there's a lot of Chinese car brands, right, today in the Gulf that are basically taking over the market. The same thing is going to happen in Africa. Now, the smart thing to do will be to use basically the empty leg cargo from China, okay, and to do assemblies in Africa so that we can assemble vehicles, so that we can assemble machinery that's going to be needed not only to re-export, so that it's a made in Africa brand, so to go around some of the tariff issues that some of the countries have today, and that China will benefit from it, but making sure that that's done by capital from the Gulf and from Africa is going to allow to keep that whole scenario neutral. For me, this is a huge opportunity. The other huge opportunity, I'm going to speak about Guinea because that's where I'm from and that's where I'm basically a player. Bauxite is basically what you need to do aluminum. Iron ore is what you need to do steel. So there's a huge opportunity with some of the energy in the West African market, but also from the Gulf and the capital, to be able to set up strong, basically, metallurgical industry in West Africa so that we can go from bauxite to aluminum and go from basically iron ore to steel. Not only you have a strong local market, these two things will be needed not only for industrialization, but also for all the infrastructure requirements in Africa, but also you are building it and you are positioning it yourself geographically to the European and American market. Okay, so for me, these are low-hanging fruits. They are no-brainers. And for us, it's a lot of money, but like we heard before here, for some of the funds in this part of the world, these are really easy investments to make. What we are here to do is to bridge that gap, is to change the narrative and the perception of risk, okay? And that's some of the work that's happening on our side by making sure that we work with the, basically with OECD, with the Standard of Poor, with all of these guys to make sure that we get the right data to the right table so that some of the capital can be less coward, like I heard before. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Agibou. That's a clear and compelling outlook. Abdullah Bashir, speaking about financing, what financing models could truly play a role in de-risking and scaling the Gulf Africa trade corridor?
First of all, low interest financing for Africa, because most of what is required over there is long. There is a lot more to be done in the, for example, in the agri space. To build an irrigation infrastructure now, you need at least you have to get a low interest fund to be able to, because to recover that money is, the gestation period is long to come back. So if you are not having a good low interest money, you cannot build irrigation. Some of the crops that you require, even to export to the Gulf countries, you require irrigation infrastructure. So, and the irrigation infrastructure you require is for large-scale farms and what have you. So, for me, I think more of low interest fund, if really is there for agriculture and long-term, you know, col collaboration in terms of how, you know, I do this, you do this, I bring this, you know, so I think that's more of it for Africa. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Low interest rates then, more public-private partnerships also.
Yeah,
Probably
yeah.
that also
Yes.
plays a huge role in
Yes.
de-risking.
Yes.
All right. Thank you for your perspective. Reda, beyond financing, we need partnership, we need structures that endure, right? So looking at the next decade, which partnership models between Africa and the Gulf could really change the game? Regional industrial zones, like what are your thoughts on that, and what conditions are needed for them truly to succeed at scale?
So, talking about the next decade, I would say I will start with GCC. GCC, in fact, it's in a deep need of Africa, for Africa. GCC actually they are making a transformation for their own economy to decrease the dependencies to hydrocarbons and finding out another models of economics to help them sustain. They need as well soft power within the continent, because the continent is actually being attractive for a lot of different powers. So this is the first constatation or the first conclusion we can find. The other one, as we have said, that corridors transform ports into platforms and platforms into economics. So both subjects are linked. And Africa is the new economics for the GCC and the normal, I would say, continuity for their efforts. So, as we have said as well, that we have some disconnects, and to overcome those disconnects and making those economics viable for GCC and triangulations, I will take some examples of what we are doing as IGAD within the continent to work around those disconnects and creating economics. So first one, it's anchoring to any ports to corridors. And this we have seen the huge, I will say, need of corridors in Africa with the Lobito corridors that has been said, some previous or the one before intervention. So actually, anchoring to corridor, it's a must for any port. And this is what we are doing for Mayumba port. That is a deep sea port that should be developed between IGAD and USA and some GCC partners to permit the export of bulk minerals and agriculture work. So those we have to include corridors like Belinga Mayumba for from north to south of Gabon to permit the scalability and bankability of such port that is Mayumba. And this we are doing it in triangulation, and we are trying to overcome. So linking to our anchoring it to a corridor. Second one, it's integrability, like have been said, for platforms of logistics, industrial and transformations. This is, I will take the two examples of, again, Mayumba, that we are integrating a transformation for a mining transformation, industrial zones that is linked directly to the Mayumba port by as well adding energy and logistics areas. but as well Tuliara, it's in the south of Madagascar. It's already anchored to the Silk Road. Nevertheless, it has to be anchored inland because inland it's important, and anchored to Tamatave, the other port that is very important going through Antananarivo. So we are actually doing Antananarivo, Tamatave, that is the main port to the capital corridor, but then creating another dependencies to agriculture and transformational. And UAE is very interesting in this, and we are doing it as well in triangulation with UAE in Madagascar. And the other one as well, it's cross-country and cross-border alignment. And this, we are trying to do it in Central Africa with the Limbe port to include as well some corridors towards, I would say, Chad, towards other Central African Republic, and why not Gabon, and linking then at the end the corridor of Belinga, Mayumba to Cameroon and to Brazzaville. So a lot of different, I would say, integrations and alignment, and for this we need to make policy enforcement.
Yes.
OECD can help. And as well GCC triangulation with, why not, Europe and US and global gateway and actual US interest in minerals in Africa. So all those can help in the coming decades.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that perspective. I'm keeping an eye on the timer. I'm going to save some time for us to interact with the audience. But Carlos, a final question to you. Given that this corridor still operates with different border procedures, non-aligned digital systems, and sort of competition between ports and logistics hubs, what would help shift toward a more coordinated and collaborative model that works end-to-end for both regions?
A very important question. And actually, we are in the third day of the Doha Forum, and for the people following the discussions the last 2 days, we are in a difficult moment of the global level, in a moment of fragmentation and conflict that also is translated sometimes into economic consequences, tariff wars, disconnection between different economies. So it's really the moment of giving a positive message about the value of economic multilateral cooperation. And this is in the DNA of the OECD. This is the reason why our organization was created in 1961. It's important to find the ways and to create the platforms and the venues for countries cooperate in a positive manner for the good of the economy and, at the end of the day, of the people. We need to look into these opportunities, and doing this in an effective manner. There is a very large toolkit. There are many things that can be used, and it's important to do it strategically. So I would like to share some reflections with you on that, about how to enhance multilateral economic cooperation overall, but especially how Gulf and Africa can work better into that dimension. Policy dialogue is very important. So we are talking about policy frameworks, regulations, we are talking about competition, investment, taxation, and all these are areas that require a lot of exchange and dialogue, finding the common ground, and also, why not, creating common principles and even regulations that can facilitate the cooperation between the different actors. So we work very actively on providing platforms for policy dialogue that can have concrete consequences. And I will give you 2 examples because they are very recent and very relevant for that. Last week, we had in Paris our global forum on competition, where all the competition authorities for many countries of the world met to discuss what are the challenges, what are the opportunities. We had plenty of participants of African countries, but also from the Middle East and North Africa, including the Gulf. Competition is fundamental. Having the right competition policies in countries. Let's think about digital integration. Well, at the end of the day, digital integration need telecom companies that are operating in the countries. They need investment that coming sometimes from international investment. And it's important to remove restrictions and creating the conditions for a healthy competition that will improve the efficiency of the market. So in our competition global forum, there are many ideas how to leverage the capacity of the different countries. This is one of the protocols of the AFCFTA that I was mentioning before. And by the way, I want to thank Saudi Arabia, who launched in Paris last week a regional initiative in all the MENA to work on competition, capacity building, and alignment between all the countries. So these platforms are important. Also, 1 month ago, we had in Mauritius the first roundtable on African capital markets, in which all the capital markets authorities of African countries meet, first of all, to share, to receive the data that we have produced and our first report on capital markets in Africa, but also identifying what are the good practices, what are the good regulations that can improve the performance of the capital markets in Africa. It's important to work on that. We believe very much in multilateral dialogue, and all these connections between policymakers and governments are fundamental. There are also a very good, in this toolkit that I'm mentioning, there are international standards, good practices that are well known. We don't have to start from scratch for a country that is building new institutions and regulations. There are international standards on taxation, on competition, on corporate governance, on SOEs, on public procurement that can inspire the enhancing the quality of the policies. Of course, if, and this is the role of our organization, if we are providing these good practices, these standards at the global level, we are facilitating an harmonization, a convergence of practices and ways of doing that are especially important for the private sector, because they are finding this predictability, this sustainability of their efforts, because they are accompanied by a solid policy and regulatory framework. But on that, and this will be my final point, is essential also to think about what is the role of the private sector. Because private sector is not just suffering regulations or being controlled or taxed by the government and the public sector. The private sector needs to be also an actor of this economic integration and needs to have a voice also in policy making. And there are many things that can be done in that front. First of all, it's important that the private sector is properly organized. So there are business associations that can facilitate very much giving the voice, bringing the voice of the private sector into the policy-making processes in order to create policies and regulations that are more effective. But also there is, let's say, a role for the private sector to work at the multilateral level and being also an effective voice in that direction. In the OECD, we have been promoting for many years, but now is something that is receiving a lot of demand, exercises of public-private dialogue. Because public-private dialogue goes beyond a company sitting in a ministry discussing a concrete operation. Okay, this is not necessarily the dialogue that will have a positive impact in the overall policy frameworks. It's important to structure institutionally in an adequate manner how the private sector interact with the public authorities. We have very good experiences that we think can facilitate also between the Gulf and Africa how to do it. And just a couple of tips based on our experience. It's important to think also sectorially. And today, we have already mentioned some sectors, of course, infrastructure, but let's think about agribusiness, let's think about pharmaceutical, let's think about ICT. All these are sectors that require a very strong and solid public action to improve the general conditions that need regulations, that need policies. It's important to work with the firms that represent those sectors when we are regulating on or when we are defining the policies. And this, for us, there are two conditions to do it in a proper manner. This dialogue needs to be evidence-based dialogue. If we are talking about agribusiness, let's put the data about what are the exchanges, what is the trade, what are the imports, the exports, what is the structure of the agricultural sector, what are the challenges that it has. And when it comes to the private sector, let's be inclusive. This is not only about big companies, it's about SMEs, it's about, it's about women associations, etc. So we think that public-private dialogue can play a very important role on that. And in the case of the Gulf and Africa, is a matter of enhancing the institutional relationship and creating the conditions for the private sector also making part of this overall discussion about how better building these corridor and this connection between the two areas.
Thank you very much. Thank you. A comprehensive toolkit that brings all these strands together perfectly. Thank you for sharing that. I'd like to turn now to the audience to see if there are any questions, reflections. Yes, please. The lady in the first row. Please just raise your hand. I want to see if there is another question in the room so we can take them both and then turn to our speakers to close this panel. Go ahead, please.
Duchess Niveen Al-Gamal, Ambassador of Peace and Regional Director of United States Institution of Diplomacy and Human Rights, USIDHR. In a rapidly shifting multipolar world, financial flows are increasingly shaping political decisions. How can we ensure that investment in Africa and the other emerging regions contribute to the long-term peace and human dignity rather than deepening dependency or geopolitical competition?
Thank you for your question. Is there any other reflection or question? Kindly just raise your hand high and our ushers will bring you the mic. And you will also have the opportunity to exchange during the networking session. Any of you gentlemen, yes, please, Reda, would you like to take it before we close on time?
Maybe I will have some points of the answers. I will say cross-border corridors have proven to establish peace. Economy and economical interests between the different countries has proven historically that peace can be established through common interests. And I will take an example in Europe. Between France and Germany, a lot of wars has happened in the past. I would say the most difficult wars that we have ever seen, it was initiated and started there. And after all those times, the peace has been definitely established through economical groupments, that's the European Union. Actually, we have seen just days ago the peace treaty that has been signed between DRC and Rwanda, and again, it was based on economical interest and common interests and common ground of discussions of developments and prosperity for both countries. So actually, cross-border investments and cross-border interests and common interests can assure peace and sustainable peace. So this is my opinion.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, kindly give our speakers a round of applause. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your expertise. I kindly ask you to please step in the middle for the group photo.